Greetings, Carl.
Hello, Michael Kitces. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Things are good. Yeah, things are good.
Ski,
It's been
ski
50.
season is good.
No, it all was 55 degrees yesterday.
Oh no. So
I
in
know.
in Park City, this is not a good thing.
This is not a good
In
thing.
DC, we're very happy when it's 55
Yeah,
degrees because it's
yeah,
it's a less punishing winter, but
yeah, not
it's
a good
not so
thing.
much there.
Yeah, yeah, but that should change the next couple of days, hopefully.
So for today's episode, I wanted to talk to you about an interesting question that cropped up from some of our wonderful advisor listeners who so I a couple of months ago we did an episode talking about sort of the challenges that as our businesses grow over time, as our skills and capabilities grow over time, often either if you're in an AUM world, you tend to migrate to larger clients, like bigger dollar clients, and your minimums go up. If you charge like planning fees, your hourly fee tends to go up, or your subscription fee tends to go up. And one of the comments that I had made was like, look, we see this happen so naturally in our data and our research around advisors that often one of the biggest things that I counsel new advisors when they're getting started is like, look, if you need to compromise on your fees at the beginning because you're just trying to get initial clients, initial revenue, and prove to yourself that like this thing's going to work and you can get people to pay you for your advice, like that's fine. Make the compromise that you've got to make to get the initial traction and survive so that you can get to the better days later. But I think I had said something in the effect of like, well, but whatever you do, like just don't promise the early clients like, hey, you're taking a risk on me. You can have this super special price for life. Like nobody really cares that you promise. Like no one who's starting with you now really says like, well, I'm not even sure you're going to be in the business in a year or two from now, but I'll totally work with you because you promised in the 2030s that you're going to give me a fee discount. Like no one actually cares that you're promising a discount like years and decades from now to make this commitment, but sometimes we do it. So I had
What was that part?
oh, it just comes out of your mouth. Like it just right. You were so desperate to get those clients.
For those who are
What's
for those who comes out of your mouth.
right? Like, what's your financial planning fee? Oh, well, it's $3,000, but I do it for two. Actually, 1,500 is my final offer, and I'll give it to you for life. And they haven't even said anything yet. Like, you just talk yourself straight down. We all do this when we're
Right,
getting started.
right.
So, like to me, just we fee compromise. My counsel and guidance, at least, has been like just don't promise it forever. And so, of course, as advisors, we have these wonderful ranges of things that we've done in our business over the years. So I got a question from one of our listeners who said, "So what if I did promise? Like, no joke. What if
Right,
I
right,
I
right,
did? I
right.
think this advice said, now like my minimum fee is $10,000 a year, like $1 million accounts, $10,000 a year. But I have some of these clients that came on board that were like, one or $200,000 10 years ago. They're $300,000 now because they've grown a little bit. They're way, way below my minimums. They're much lower than everybody else that I'm serving. But I gave my word. How can I possibly go back on it now? Right? At some point, this isn't even a business thing. This is like an integrity thing. I can't go
Gosh.
back on my word now. And
Yeah,
so
it's
that so the question became like, so what do you do? What do you do? Like, yes, we said don't promise this for life, but okay, what do you do if you did? Like, if you really
yeah.
did?
Yeah, it's wow, such a good question. It's fun, like it's like kind of humorous, and then I feel this sort of deep empathy because even if you didn't, I mean, I want to talk about explicitly doing that, but even if you didn't explicitly do it, there's often the feeling that you did,
Correct.
whether in your own mind or even in the interpretation of the client or whatever. Like
Yep.
even if it wasn't this clear, but let's talk about it being this clear first, because in this case it was. Man, that's interesting, right? I mean, my first response to this, and I'm curious to get yours, is that mean, the first thing I'm thinking is like, gosh, it's such an interesting, this whole dilemma is so interesting. I kind of profit's really important to me. Like making money is really important to me. And it's mainly important because I think of profit as permission to keep making the impact that I want to make. And so and yet having said that, um, it's not the right, like it's not the only thing that matters in life, that's for sure. And so I get all tied up in knots when we talk
Yep.
about like always having to move our fees up and charge more money and I get all tied up in knots. But when I get back to it, it's like, okay, if profit equals permission, if that's the principle, at least in my mind, and I know other people
Can
would
you
have different views of this.
can
What?
you just explain that? I'm actually not sure how much you've talked about that on the podcast before. What is profit equals permission?
Yeah. So, and I want to be clear about this. It doesn't, you can't use this as an excuse to do terrible things, and nobody listening to this would do that. But some people have said, oh, so if I make profit, I have permission. No, that's not what I mean. What I mean is, to me, a whole bunch of things changed about how I feel about sales and marketing, my monthly meeting with my CFO, my income
Mhm.
statement, all of those things. At first, I was like, whatever. Like, and so even a little bit of like, that's dirty. Don't get in the way of my creative, impactful work. Once I started realizing, like, hey, man, if you want to keep making an impact, profit is the fuel for making that. Like,
Mhm.
only thing I really care about, the current project I'm working on, the only, and we'll get back to this advisor question, but the current project I'm working on, all that really matters about the current project, the main goal of the current project is to earn permission to do the next one and to keep doing that for the next 30 years of
Oh,
my life.
meaning make sure each project is profitable enough that you can do another thing.
One version of permission is profit, like audience permission, trust, all those things come in,
Mm.
but let's just narrow in on. So what I mean when I say profit equals permission is profit equals permission to keep doing the work I'm doing. If the business isn't, as an advisor, if the business isn't profitable,
Yep.
you will not be able to do it anymore.
Right.
And so that's where like if
Okay.
if we'd be okay, like, and again, you could argue about this and we could debate it, but to me, that's like the central financial principle of running
Yeah.
the kind of businesses I think of is once I change profit equals permission, it's sort of like, well, I need to make this business sustainable,
Yep.
or else I'm not going to be around.
Yeah.
So then that's how I would view this question through that lens of like, okay, boy, I made a
Yeah.
commitment. That's really important to me. Then we quickly devolve into the kind of head stuff that we got to talk about a little bit, right? Like these people took a chance on me and all that stuff, which you hinted at. So then I'm like, well, I got a choice. I look at this if it's sustainable and maybe I make a decision that I made. I feel like I made a commitment and I'm gonna stick with it. Maybe that's a decision I make, you know? Maybe I make a decision like, wait, I know I made a commitment, but I've got new facts now, right? Things have changed and this isn't sustainable anymore. And I have to have an open, hey, I know I made this commitment to you,
Yeah.
but I can't continue to operate this way. And I make a decision there. And that would involve a very direct conversation, but I wouldn't hide it. I'd acknowledge it. So anyway, tell me where your head goes.
I I think it's so as usual, like I follow a different path, but I get to a similar place
Mhm.
as you. Like and again, this was written in, so I didn't get an opportunity to ask follow-up questions. Like my first question when I hear a scenario like this, are we literally talking about like a client we promised?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Or are we
yeah,
talking about like a big swath of clients
yeah. I
that
love that.
that we promised? Because the first thing I do think about is like really what is the impact on the business, on the sustainability of the business in the first place. I mean the reality is was saying sometimes like growth forgives growth in business forgives a lot of business sins. there are things that we've done that maybe weren't ideal that we can grow our way through. Okay, I've got a couple of clients that aren't profitable, but I'm growing now with the core who are. I make sure that all new clients come in are sufficiently profitable. And if I've got a little base of people that maybe are from the past and legacy, maybe are exceptions, maybe are accommodations, maybe are just people that I want to serve in the community and it's
Mm.
really not about the profit, you can always make the decision for the business to say, I've got some segment of either literally pro bono clients or substantially below market fee clients because reasons, whatever reasons you want those to be. Like, this is a pro bono thing, this is a community thing, this is a give back thing, this is an honor your commitment thing, this is a legacy thing, whatever it is. Like, there are a lot of different ways that we might want to say, hey, a segment of my clients are going to be knowingly less profitable or literally not. And as long as that's a not terribly large segment, okay. Like, if you want to make the decision to run your business at slightly lower margins, or you've got partners and you've come collectively to decide that it's okay to run the business at slightly lower margins to manage this, like, you get to do that as a business owner, as a practice owner. Like, you really do get to make that decision up to a point, right? And the point is when there's so many of them that the business isn't really viable and sustainable.
Yeah.
And now, like,
Yeah.
you can't grow, you can't hire, you can't promote people, you can't delegate and free up your time. Like, I've seen some advisors that go through versions of this challenge, and it's like, I've seen your business, a few of them, like, I've seen your financials. You're doing fine. Like, just ride it out, call it a gracious thing you're doing for a segment of clients and move on.
Yeah.
And then I've seen some others, like, you're working 60
Too much.
hours a
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
I am watching you burn out because you have so many of these clients that are so far below the fee that it takes for your business to be sustainable that you are literally unsustainable.
Yeah.
Like, the business is not economically
Yeah.
viable, or it takes so many hours from you to do it that you are not sustainable on this path. Right. I mean, we don't really have very capital intensive businesses. Usually we don't go under because, like, we can't make payroll. We go under because it takes so many hours from us to do the thing that we burn out. And we don't have enough revenue to hire people to delegate it to because of these scenarios. So my first question becomes, like, really, how many clients is it? How much impact are we talking about? Because almost by definition, it's either not enough clients to matter. So then, peace be with you, make whatever decision you're going to make and move on. Or it's enough of them that it does matter and
Right.
threatens the sustainability of the business. And to me, at that point, then just all the stakes change, because now you're literally talking about burnout, sustainability, the ability to support and keep doing this business and serving people the way that you want to serve. And I guess I'm intrigued by kind of your profit equals permission from that end. Like, if you don't run a business that's profitable enough because you have too many of these exceptions, you're not giving yourself permission to sustain this great service that you're doing and this great thing that you're trying to create for your community. And
Totally.
then it
Yeah.
to me just
I love that.
then it has to change.
Yeah, that's really helpful framing just in of like what are we talking about here? Like really helpful framing. I think two things I want to mention. One is there's a population of people who are listening right now that are like, totally relate. Like they come to retreats here. We do the Society of Advice retreats here. And every retreat, there's a good chunk of people. I would say is like 40% of people who are in this place where they're like in tears. This is unsustainable. It's impacting my health. It's impacting my marriage. It's impact like all of these sorts of things. So like there's a group of listeners that will resonate deeply with, and they'll be like, yeah. And then there's a whole nother group of listeners who are like, whatever, like nice problem. I'd love to. And I think it's really, it makes sense unless you've experienced it.
Yeah.
It feels like kind of like a problem I would wish to have. And it
Yeah,
might
but
be, maybe. But it's a real, I just want to point out that it's a real thing, that this burnout issue of like because we're so many of us are so service oriented, and so committed to impact and wanting to make a difference, all those beautiful things. We just have to guard's not the right word. We just need to be thoughtful about. I always try to remind people like, yeah, but if you're not around 5 years from now, you're not making an impact on anyone.
Well, and you're not going to be providing them advice at these fees indefinitely if you have to shut down your business in another year or two or
Exactly
three
right.
because
Exactly
because
right.
because you're burning out because you can't hire the support that you need because you don't have the revenue where it needs to
Exactly
be
right. Yeah,
because there's too many clients at just a not economically viable level to sustain.
totally. And then the other principle that I really love is this idea of just being really clear about both value creation and value extraction. And And I think value creation, like you got to be really clear about the kind of value you're creating in people's lives. And we have spent, and we could spend more episodes talking about value creation. But I think it's interesting to just think about what is the value that you as the advisor are extracting from this experience. And you sort of pointed to it, like it could be community, it could be I'm keeping my word.
Yeah.
There's only like profit revenue is only one form of the value we get out of these relationships. So there could be relationships that takes us that takes us a back seat to some other value that we're extracting. I don't love the word extract, but it's the right word for this. Like what's the like, man, I get so much out of helping that person because it just makes me feel good. Well, that's valuable to you. Like that's a value. And you're just going to be intentional about thinking through that in the scenario where you're like, okay, what's really going on here? What impact is it having? Well, I love adding one more question to that. And so like, what's the value I get from this relationship? Because in some cases, profit may not be the most important thing you're getting out of a relationship. It could just be fulfilling a commitment you made to yourself or others,
Right.
could be the community. It could be you're learning so much from this one experience because we can think of lots of reasons, right? Like you're learning so much that you're actually getting so much knowledge and impact. Like maybe you're helping somebody who's really, really good. I'm thinking of like a relationship I had once with she was like a deeply trained psychologist that focused on executive coaching, and she didn't pay the fee that, I mean, it was one of my least profitable clients, but
Yeah.
I learned so much in every interaction from her that was the value I was getting out of the relationship, and that's okay, right? As long
So
as I can continue to run my bill. I can't pay my bills with that.
yeah. So let me bring us back the other direction though, 'cause I feel like we're all really good at coming up with the rationalization
Sure.
of the
That's
reason of why we shouldn't have to deal with this situation, or like there's an acceptable reason that says we should be able to hold on to this client or these clients,
right.
because I am
Stories.
presuming if it's a problem we're almost certainly talking about multiple many clients.
Right.
So let's say it is, right? We've done the math where whatever
Yeah.
the business is under 20% margins, which to me is an advisory firm that um doesn't have a lot of room and capacity. If you pay yourself a fair wage to be an advisor and you pay your staff and the number at the bottom isn't 20%, at the end of the day, your advisory firm tends to have some challenges and
Mm.
issues.
Mm.
Or if you're getting to a number that's higher than that, but you're working 60 hours a week, because you haven't hired yet, and if you actually hired someone to work a reasonable number of hours, your number would drop below that. You still have that problem, right? Some of us are like, I got a wonderfully profitable practice. I'm like, yes, but you work a redonkulous number of hours and it is not healthy for you. So if you can't
Yeah.
hire the staff to work a healthy number of hours, you've still got this problem. So let's say we're there and we have this problem.
Yeah.
How do you actually deal with this?
Yeah. I think this is really, really simple, not easy. Right? You just go have a hard conversation, right? Like, and I think that conversation looks like, look, this has been your fee. And if you're really clear about the idea that now I want to, this I think is important. The email we're addressing here, it was somebody who was very clear that they had, like, it sounds like made explicit
Yeah, I mean
commitment.
the comment we got, like, I gave my word.
Yeah, yeah.
How
So
can I possibly go back on it now?
if that's the case and the business is unsustainable, then I think again you have a it's this is a very simple solution, but not easy, and it's even particularly not easy. It's even harder given the framework we've set up here. But you just say, I know I told you that you'd get this for life. Like you'd have to say something like this, right? I know I told you that that this would be your fee for life, but I'm gonna just level with you. Like that's not sustainable as a business for me. And let me walk you through. And then you're back to the normal fee raising conversation, right? And again, there might be
Just
some
saying, so
objections.
I mean, I think I would be in the same place. You would just come back to them with, like, this is where it needs to be. And then it'll
Yeah,
be their choice. All right, like, you don't have to fire the client per se,
yeah,
but like, this is where the fee needs to be for us to be sustainable, or this is where the asset minimum has to be if that's your model for
yeah,
us to be sustainable. Or I'm a fan of set a minimum fee. Either they'll get there by paying it outright, or they'll get there with assets, and they can make that decision. But
yeah.
you know, this is where the fee needs to be in order for us to be able to serve you and all of our clients sustainably. Would you like to do that?
Yeah, and I think there's two things that are important. One, like sort of deep empathy for the change, like just understanding, like, and then don't over-index on it. Because I think my what I think will happen based on all, I mean, we've both been through hundreds, if not thousands of these watched advisors have hundreds, if not thousands of these
Mm-hmm.
conversations, either, with with an email that went out
Yep.
or with, and they almost always go way, way, way easier than you expect.
Hmm.
And so I would have deep empathy for the idea that you're changing something, but I wouldn't over index on it, meaning like I would actually be surprised if you sat down and you said, look, I know I made this commitment 17 and a half years ago or 3.5 years ago or whatever, and that this would be for life. But as I've built the business, I've come to realize like I made a mistake there. Like that's not, I can't run a business on that. And in fact, market, you know, here, 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 and here. Like you can go into all the rationale on why, and that's back to value creation. Like you're really clear. And this is the same conversation we have anytime you're raising fees. Like you got to be really clear about it. And then I think it's really easy to say, look, I would love to keep you. I've enjoyed working with you. But this is what it needs to look like going forward. And so I'm committed to two things. One, I hope that works.
Mm-hmm.
And two, if it doesn't, I will do everything in my power to find
Yeah.
a great home. Like I'll help you with that. You go interview advisors. I'll tell you what I think. And so we're just
Yeah.
deeply human, acknowledging both sides of the situation. Don't you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, I very much agree, right? It's just, one of the crappy realities that hits almost all of us at some point in the grown-up world, right? Like, when we're kids, you learn a promise means a promise, and when you're an adult, sometimes you get to that point of saying, like, of having to acknowledge, like, I made a promise that I'm just not going to be able to keep, and I
Yeah.
have to have as you said, like, what was it? Is simple but not easy
Yeah.
conversation of, I'm so sorry, but I made a promise that I really can't keep. Like, we cannot sustain the service that we provide to you and all of our other clients at the fee that I promised you originally to hold. And
Yeah.
we need to update
Yeah.
our fees to reflect current business realities so that we can serve sustainably. And this is where the number needs to be for that to happen.
Yeah. And again, even hearing you say it, like a promise that we can't keep, I just want to recognize this is hard because I'm the same.
It's awful.
Like nothing drives me more crazy than lying and seeing people lie and call it marketing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. Like no, so I don't these boundary conditions and these lines are really, really fuzzy.
What?
But I think one of the important parts of what you're pointing at is I think one of the I think one of the parts of making it a promise that needs to be changed as an adult is that you do owe it to the person you made the promise to acknowledge
Yep.
the situation, right? Rather than, hey, we're changing our fees, right? Like I think it like that may be the normal discussion. but in a situation where you felt like you made an actual promise, an actual commitment.
Yeah.
And I think, look, if the reality is if we were to stick with this commitment I made back then with the information I had at the time, we can't run a business.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, I think, and then I just want to soften things real quick. Like, let's get outside of the narrow band of like I made a commitment. There's so often we feel like we made that commitment.
Oh, well, yeah, they took a chance on me, like when I wasn't that experienced and maybe didn't even really know as many things as I know now. Yeah, I feel like almost all of us have this like debt of
Implied almost, at
gratitude
least.
feeling
Yeah.
to the first few clients that were willing to work with us, that took a chance on us, that got us to where we are, because I wouldn't be at the place where I can work with these somewhat more complex, higher dollar clients today if they hadn't been willing to be one of my first clients back then. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like almost virtually all of us feel some very significant debt of gratitude to the early clients and want to do
Yeah.
something
And
with
I
them
think
for
that's,
them.
yeah, I think that's similar, like sort of thought process as you talked about. And I want to point out one really important part, which I just think the framing you set up was really, really good, which is like like, what are we talking about here? Because I do know plenty of advisors who are like, one of my favorite answers to this is like, you know what? I don't even think about it anymore because those 10 or 15
Yeah, again,
clients,
like
the
that's
business
why
is
I start with
profitable. I'm making more money than I ever worried about. It's not a problem.
that's why I
I
start
love
like
that answer.
is it really
Yeah.
a problem for the business, right? And
Yeah.
I've seen it both ways, right? Sometimes it sort of nags at us. Like I've got some clients that are really below market and I made some promises. I'm like, okay, but is it actually creating a problem for the business? If it's not, I mean, you can still change it because it's your practice and you get to decide who you work with and what you charge them. But if it's not a problem for the business, it's not a problem for the business. But if it
Yeah.
is a problem for the business, it is a problem for the business.
That's right.
And right and to me, what forever and always, like one of the defining characteristics of successful business owners is that they make the hard decisions, right? Which is
Yeah.
a thing I feel like gets thrown around a lot. All of us say, like, well, I've had like hard things where I had to make hard decisions. I'm like, no, 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 like this is one of those actual hard decision
Yeah.
moments. Like hard decisions means decisions that don't always feel great, but they need to
Yeah.
be done because it's the right thing for the business to be sustainable, to be able to continue to serve. And I mean, that's the mindset I think about it in. Like, this isn't a, well, I didn't take on enough in profit distributions last year, so I think it's time to raise your fees. Maybe if you want to do that, that's your prerogative. But I mean, I very much think about this in the vein of there's a point where you just decide to be a little less profitable or not. You get to decide what kind of margin you want to run your business. And there's a point where you're running the business at margins and profitability so low that you're burning out, you're spending too many hours, you can't hire the staff that you need. You're at risk that in the next bull market and market decline or fee decline, you're not going to be able to make payroll. Like there is a threshold where you're just giving up a little bit of profit or not because you choose to. And there's a point where there's so much at risk that you really could tank the business.
Totally.
And then you're not
Yeah.
helping anyone.
Super interesting. Yeah. And I love, I mean, even like, yeah, you mentioned it again in that last couple of sentences around like, can I continue to have the impact I'm having? Right. And everything that goes into sustainable, all of it.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I think that's great. I love that framing. Thanks. That was
Awesome.
really good.
All right. Thank you, Carl.
Yep. Cheers, Michael.